I never thought I'd be the type of woman who would find herself in this situation. The type who looks in the mirror and doesn't recognize her own eyes staring back. The type who wakes up at 3 a.m. with her heart pounding, replaying moments that should never have happened. But here I am. I suppose I should start with that night in Colorado. Though the truth is, everything that came after is what truly haunts me. The retreat was at one of those luxury mountain lodges in Aspen, all timber and stone, with floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the Rockies like living artwork. Mark had been working for Hadley Financial for 7 years by then, and I'd perfected my role as the supportive wife at these corporate events. The right dress, elegant but not flashy. The right conversation topics, engaging but never controversial. The right amount of wine, just enough to be sociable, never enough to be loose-lipped. That evening had been a blur of networking and forced laughter. I'd smiled until my cheeks hurt, asking the same questions about children and vacation homes that I always did. Mark was in his element, of course, working the room, his hand on the small of my back when he'd introduce me, then drifting away to discuss whatever deals were more important than the fact that we barely spoke anymore unless it was about his schedule or some household matter. It was nearly midnight when I escaped to the grand room with its massive stone fireplace. Everyone else had migrated to the outdoor hot tubs or retired to their rooms. I thought I was alone, curled up on one of the leather sofas with a book I wasn't really reading, when I heard the ice clinking in a glass. Not a fan of hot tubs in January? The voice came from behind me, and I knew immediately who it belonged to. Daniel Reed, 38 to my 42. The wunderkind who'd taken over the company 2 years ago and turned it from a respectable investment firm into the talk of Wall Street. I left my bathing suit in Denver, I replied, not looking up from my book. It wasn't entirely true. I'd packed it, but chose not to join the forced camaraderie of drunk executives and their spouses, pretending to enjoy the frigid dash from water to towel. He circled around to my field of vision, tumbler of amber liquid in hand. I'd seen him from across rooms before, had exchanged pleasantries at company dinners. Up close, there was something disarming about him. Not just the obvious. The thick dark hair with premature silver at the temples. The eyes that seemed to shift between blue and gray depending on the light. It was something else. A stillness, maybe. Like he wasn't trying to fill every silence with proof of his importance. Mind if I join you? He gestured to the opposite end of the sofa. I dog-eared my page, a habit Mark always scolded me for, and nodded. It's your retreat. He sat, leaving a respectful distance between us. That doesn't make it my sofa. A small smile tugged at my lips despite myself. Fair enough. We sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling, snow falling in thick flakes outside the windows. I expected him to fill the quiet with questions about how I was enjoying the weekend, or comments about how well Mark was doing. The usual boss talk. Instead, he said, "You know, every time I see you at these events, you have the same look in your eyes." I turned to him, genuinely surprised. "What look is that?" "Like you're watching a play you've seen too many times." He took a sip of his drink. "You know all the lines, all the movements, but you're just going through the motions." My heart stuttered in my chest. I felt exposed, as if he'd peeled back my skin and peered directly at the truth I'd been hiding, even from myself. No one had really seen me in so long. Not Mark, who looked past me more than at me these days. Not my friends back in Denver, who only got the carefully curated version of my life that I shared over lunches and phone calls. "That's quite an observation from someone who's barely spoken 3 sentences to me before tonight," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I notice things. It's part of my job." He shifted slightly, angling toward me. People reveal themselves in the smallest ways. How they hold themselves when they think no one's watching. The smile that doesn't quite reach their eyes. "And what exactly do you think you see?" I asked, suddenly defensive. Who was he to analyze me? To think he understood anything about my life from across a crowded room? Someone who's built her entire existence around being what everyone needs her to be. His eyes held mine, unwavering. "And I wonder if anyone ever asks what you need." The words hit me like a physical force. I'd spent 15 years of marriage being what Mark needed. The perfect corporate wife who'd put her own design career on hold to support his ambitions, who'd moved 3 times for his promotions, who managed our home and social calendar with flawless efficiency. I'd become so good at it that I sometimes forgot there had been a time when I had dreams of my own. "You don't know me," I said softly, but there was no conviction behind it. "No," he agreed, "but I'd like to." There it was, the moment that would divide my life into before and after. 4 simple words that shouldn't have meant anything, that I should have politely deflected with a laugh or a change of subject. Instead, I felt something unravel inside me, a tightly wound coil of longing that had been compressed for so long I'd forgotten it was there. "Why?" I asked, the single word carrying the weight of everything I couldn't say. He set his glass down and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Because I think there's more to Claire Morgan than what you let people see. And because every time you walk into a room, I can't look anywhere else. I should have left then. Should have made an excuse about being tired or needing to check on Mark. Instead, we talked. For hours. About books and art and places we'd traveled. About growing up in Michigan, him, and California, me. About the year he'd spent teaching English in Japan before college, and how I'd almost moved to Paris to study design before meeting Mark. He asked questions no one had asked me in years, about my opinions, my preferences, not just as an extension of my husband, but as myself. Dawn was breaking when we finally said goodnight, a pale gray light filtering through the windows. Nothing had happened, not really. No lines had been crossed, no vows broken. But as I slipped back into the room where Mark slept, dead to the world after too many scotches, I knew something fundamental had shifted. The rest of the retreat passed in a blur. I found myself watching for Daniel across crowded rooms, my skin prickling with awareness whenever he was near. We didn't seek each other out again, maintained a careful distance that I think we both knew was its own kind of acknowledgement. On the last morning, as everyone was checking out, he shook Mark's hand, then mine. "It was a pleasure getting to know you, Claire," he said, his tone professional, his eyes saying something else entirely. "Likewise," I replied, the single word inadequate for the storm it contained. Back in Denver, I tried to push that night from my mind, to fall back into the rhythm of my life. Charity committee meetings, dinners with other executives and their wives, the gym, the occasional freelance design project I still took on to keep my skills from completely atrophying. But something had awakened in me that refused to be put back to sleep. A week later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I'm in town for meetings." Coffee? I knew who it was without asking. Knew I should delete it immediately. Instead, I found myself at a small cafe in Cherry Creek the next afternoon, telling myself it was just coffee, just conversation, just the simple pleasure of being seen. One coffee became 2, became lunch the next time he was in Denver, became walks in the park where we talked about everything and nothing, always in public places, always with the plausible deniability that these were innocent meetings. But we both knew better, could feel it in the electric space between our bodies when we sat across from each other, in the way our hands would occasionally brush, accidental touches that sent currents racing up my arm. "I can't stop thinking about you," he confessed one afternoon as we sat on a bench in Washington Park, the early spring sun warming the air. "I know I shouldn't say it. I know it's wrong on every level, but I need you to know that this isn't casual for me." I stared at the lake, watching a pair of ducks glide across the surface. "I'm married," I said, as if he might have somehow forgotten this central fact. "I know." His voice was quiet, pained. "And I respect that. I respect him. That's why I haven't." He trailed off. "Haven't what?" I asked, turning to look at him. The intensity in his eyes made my breath catch. "Haven't done any of the things I think about doing every time I see you." The honesty of it, the raw, unfiltered want in his voice, sent a shiver through me. No one had looked at me like that in years, like I was something precious and desired, not just convenient and familiar. "I should go," I whispered, standing abruptly. We can't. He caught my hand just for a moment. I know, I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry for how I feel. I pulled away and walked to my car, my legs unsteady beneath me. When I got home, I sat in the driveway for nearly an hour, trying to compose myself before going inside, trying to reconcile the woman I'd always been, loyal, dependable, honest, with the woman who couldn't stop thinking about another man's hands, another man's voice, another man's gaze that made her feel like the most fascinating creature on earth. That night, Mark came home late as usual, loosening his tie as he walked through the door. "How was your day?" he asked. The question automatic, his attention already on the stack of mail I'd left on the counter. "Fine," I said, the lie bitter on my tongue. "Just the usual." He nodded absently, flipping through envelopes. "The Anderson deal is coming together. Might need to go to Chicago next week." "Okay," I replied, realizing he hadn't actually looked at me once since coming home. Would he even notice if I wasn't here? If I disappeared completely? "I think I'll go to bed early. I have a headache." "Feel better," he said, already reaching for his phone, which had started buzzing. Lying in bed that night, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when we'd become strangers who shared a house. There had been love once. Real, passionate, consuming love. Somewhere along the way, it had eroded so gradually, I hadn't noticed its disappearance until it was gone. Replaced by routine, by obligation, by the comfortable numbness of two people who had forgotten how to reach for each other. The next few weeks were torture. I stopped responding to Daniel's texts, avoided the places I knew he might be when he was in town, threw myself into being the perfect wife with renewed determination, cooked Mark's favorite meals, suggested a weekend getaway that he was too busy to take, initiated sex one night only to feel my heart crack when he kissed me perfunctorily, his movements efficient and disconnected. I was in our walk-in closet, reorganizing it for the third time that week, a futile attempt to create order in at least one part of my life, when I found the small velvet box hidden in the back of Mark's drawer. Inside was a diamond tennis bracelet, stunning and expensive. My birthday was months away, our anniversary even further. For a moment, wild hope surged through me. Maybe he'd sensed the distance between us too. Maybe this was his way of trying to bridge it. That hope withered when I found the gift receipt tucked beneath the lining. The bracelet had been purchased 6 months ago. Not for me, then. Not unless he'd been planning some surprise for half a year. The truth hit me with nauseating clarity. This was meant for someone else. Someone who received the parts of him I no longer did. His attention, his desire, his effort. I don't remember putting the bracelet back. Don't remember walking downstairs or sitting on the couch. I only remember the crushing weight on my chest as everything I thought I knew about my life revealed itself to be an illusion. The perfect husband, the solid marriage, the sacrifices that had been worth it because we were building something together. I called Daniel that night, asked if he could meet me. Found myself at an upscale hotel bar downtown, wearing a dress I'd bought years ago for a gallery opening. Before I'd packed away that part of myself, along with my other abandoned dreams, he was waiting when I arrived, standing as I approached, his eyes taking me in with that same intensity that had unraveled me in Colorado. "Claire," he said, just my name, but it felt like more. I slid onto the bar stool beside him, ordered a martini I didn't really want, and said without preamble, "I think Mark is having an affair." Daniel's expression shifted from desire to concern in an instant. What happened? So I told him. About the bracelet. About the growing distance. About the late nights and the distraction and all the small signs I'd been ignoring because it was easier than facing the truth. "I'm sorry," he said when I finished, his hand covering mine on the bar. "You deserve better than that." I looked down at our hands, his tanned and strong over my pale fingers. "Do I? I've been meeting a man behind my husband's back for weeks, having emotional intimacies, if not physical ones. What does that make me?" "Human," he said simply. "It makes you human, Claire. We all want to be seen, to be desired, to matter to someone." My eyes filled with tears that I blinked back furiously. "I don't know what I'm doing here," I whispered. "I don't know what I want from you." His thumb traced small circles on the back of my hand. "Yes, you do. he said, his voice low. But I won't be the mistake you make because you're hurt. I won't be your revenge. A small broken laugh escaped me. Then what is this? What are we doing? He was quiet for a moment, considering. I think, he said finally, we're two people who found each other at the wrong time, who feel something that would be perfect in another life. Another life, I echoed, the words hollow. We sat in silence, his hand still on mine, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. Finally, I stood, steadier than I'd felt in weeks. I should go home, I said. I need to figure out what's left of my marriage. What's left of me. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. For what it's worth, I think you're extraordinary, Claire Morgan. In any life. I leaned down and pressed my lips to his cheek, allowing myself that one small transgression. His skin was warm, slightly rough with evening stubble. I breathed him in, sandalwood and citrus, and something uniquely him, then pulled away before I could change my mind. Goodbye, Daniel, I said, and walked out of the bar without looking back. The confrontation with Mark came later that night, when he finally came home. I was sitting at the kitchen island, still in my dress, a cup of cold tea in front of me. We need to talk, I said as he set down his briefcase. I asked about the bracelet directly, watched his face go through a complicated series of expressions. Surprise, guilt, then a kind of resigned relief, as if he'd been waiting for this moment too. Ah, it's not what you think, he began, the oldest line in the book. Then what is it? I asked, voice steady. What followed was a conversation that stretched until dawn. Painful, raw, necessary. There was another woman, yes, a junior analyst at the firm. Nothing physical had happened yet, he swore, but the intention had been there. The emotional affair had been going on for months. I don't know when we lost each other, he said, hours into our talk, his voice hoarse. I just know that one day I looked at you and felt like I was seeing a stranger, like we were just going through the motions. The echo of Daniel's words from that night in Colorado wasn't lost on me. Mark and I had been mirroring each other's disconnect, both feeling it, neither brave enough to name it. Do you want to try to fix this? I asked, as the first light of dawn crept through our kitchen windows. Or are we just prolonging the inevitable? He looked at me then, really looked at me, for what felt like the first time in years. I don't know, he answered honestly. Do you? I thought about the girl I'd been when we met, 27, full of ambition and creativity. The woman I'd become, polished, efficient, hollow. The woman I caught glimpses of when I was with Daniel. Alive, seen, real. I think, I said slowly, that I need to find myself before I can answer that. I need to remember who I am without being someone's wife. A week later, I moved into a small apartment in the city. Not a separation exactly, more like a pause, a space to breathe. Mark stayed in our house in Cherry Creek. We agreed to 6 months apart, to therapy, both couples and individual, to no dating other people while we figured things out. I expected to hear from Daniel, prepared my speech about needing time, about not jumping from one relationship to another. But no message came. 3 weeks after I moved out, Mark mentioned casually that Daniel had taken a position with a firm in London, had left the country without a word to me. It should have been a relief, a clean break. Instead, I found myself standing in my new kitchen, a strange grief washing over me for something that had never really been, for possibilities now foreclosed, for the way he had looked at me like I was worth seeing. That was 4 months ago. Since then, I've been rediscovering pieces of myself that I thought were lost forever. I've started designing again, a small collection of furniture that a boutique in Reno has agreed to showcase. I've made new friends who know me only as Claire, not as Mark's wife. I've remembered how to listen to my own voice instead of constantly anticipating others' needs. Mark and I still see each other weekly. Awkward dinners where we try to remember how to talk without the buffer of social events or household logistics. Sometimes I catch glimpses of the man I fell in love with. Sometimes he feels like a complete stranger. Our therapist says this is normal, that we're getting to know each other again as the people we've become, not the people we were. I don't know if we'll find our way back to each other. Some days I think maybe we can build something new from the ashes of what we had. Other days, I'm not sure there's enough left to salvage. What I do know is that I'm grateful, strangely, painfully grateful, for that night in Colorado. For the man who saw through my carefully constructed facade and reminded me that I was still there, underneath it all. Who woke me up to the fact that I had been sleepwalking through my own life. I haven't heard from Daniel. Don't expect to. But sometimes, when I'm working late in my studio, or walking alone through the city streets, I think about what he said that last night. About finding each other at the wrong time. About what might have been perfect in another life. And I wonder, as I continue this journey of rediscovering myself, what kind of life I'm building now. What kind of woman I'm becoming. Whether, when all is said and done, I'll look back on that snowy night in Aspen as the beginning of an ending, or the ending of a beginning. Either way, I'm finally awake, finally present in my own story, and for now, that has to be enough.